Suppose a person sets out from the center of Moscow and begins to walk, not toward any particular place and not for any particular reason, but simply to take 1 million steps. The number sounds almost ceremonial. A million of anything feels like a lot, and yet a single step is such a small, ordinary thing that the mind quietly files the whole journey under a long afternoon. A million steps, a nice round figure. Surely it ends somewhere within the city or just past its edge. We picture a tired walker at dusk, somewhere among the outer apartment blocks, the towers of the center still visible behind them. It does not end there. By the time the millionth step lands, the walker is not in a suburb of Moscow. The walker has passed through Tver, continued north, reached Leningrad, and kept going. The error is not small. It is more than 100 kilometers of error, hidden inside a number we believed we understood. This is a video about that gap, and about why the very same gap reappears in places that have nothing to do with walking. And to see where the journey actually ends, we need only 2 ingredients, and both of them are deliberately simple. The first is the size of a single step. A comfortable adult pace covers roughly 3/4 of a meter. There is nothing exotic in that figure. It is the kind of measurement one could confirm with a tape and a tiled floor in about a minute, and averaging a handful of ordinary strides lands in the same neighborhood of values. Nothing in what follows depends on the figure being exact. Call it 75 centimeters per step and hold it steady. The second ingredient is the number 1 million. Here the trouble begins because a million is not really a quantity the mind can hold. We can picture 3 of something, or 10, or perhaps 100. Beyond that, we stop counting and start gesturing. A million becomes a synonym for many, a word rather than an amount. And once a number turns into a word, it loses its scale. It floats free of the thing it is meant to measure. That is the quiet trap, and it is worth naming precisely. The step is concrete and small. The count is abstract and large. When we place the 2 together, intuition attends to the step, which feels modest, and quietly ignores the count, which has stopped meaning anything specific. So the product feels modest too. The walk feels like a walk, but the product does not care what the walk feels like. Multiplication is indifferent to intuition. To find the true distance, we have to stop gesturing at the million and actually let it act on the 75 centimeters, 1 step at a time, a million times over. The arithmetic is about to be unkind to our sense of scale. Let us do the multiplication slowly, because every stage of it is a place where intuition could have intervened and did not. We have 1 million steps, and each step is 75 hundredths of a meter. The distance in meters is 1 million multiplied by 0.75. 1 million times 0.75 is 750,000. So the walk is 750,000 meters long. Already the figure looks nothing like a long afternoon, but meters are themselves a small unit, and 750,000 of them is still just a large word. We need to convert into something the body understands. A kilometer is 1,000 meters. To move from meters to kilometers, we divide by 1,000, which simply removes 3 zeros from the end of the figure. 750,000 meters becomes 750 kilometers. That is the entire calculation, and nothing clever is hidden inside it. 1 multiplication and 1 division, each of them the sort of thing we would trust a child to check on the back of an envelope. We can even check it from the other direction. 1,000 steps at 3/4 of a meter each comes to 750 meters, comfortably short of a kilometer. The million is 1,000 of those thousands, and 1,000 of those 750 meter stretches is 750 kilometers. The 2 routes through the arithmetic agree, as they are obliged to, and notice what just happened to the unit. We began with a quantity that felt almost too small to bother with, 3/4 of 1 meter, and we ended with 750 kilometers. The number itself, 75, never really changed character. What changed was the unit attached to it and the number of times we applied it. The smallness of the step was genuine, but it was local. Repeated a million times, locality vanishes, and a tiny per-step distance accumulates into a continental one. This is the part the mind refuses to pre-compute. We feel the size of 1 step and silently assume the total will inherit that size. It does not. The total inherits the size of the multiplication. A small unit, applied an enormous number of times, produces a result governed not by the unit, but by the count. 750 kilometers is simply the count finally making itself felt. 750 kilometers is still only a number until we set it on a map, so let us set it on the one that matters here, the map from Moscow to Leningrad. The distance between Moscow and Leningrad, the city now called St. Petersburg, is about 640 kilometers. That is not a casual stroll. It is one of the great corridors of Russian geography, a journey that for most of history meant days of travel between two capitals. 640 kilometers is the scale of a nation, not a neighborhood. Now place our walkers 750 kilometers beside it. 750 is larger than 640. The million steps do not merely reach the outskirts of Moscow, and they do not merely point in the direction of Leningrad. They cover the entire distance between the two cities, the whole long corridor through Tver and beyond. And then they continue for another 110 kilometers past Leningrad, out the far side toward the Gulf of Finland. Hold that image because it sits at the center of everything that follows. A walker who set out intending nothing more dramatic than a large round number of small steps would arrive not at a landmark across town, but at a point beyond a city 600 kilometers away. The map makes the error impossible to wave aside. The abstraction, 1 million steps, and the geography past Leningrad are the same fact seen from two sides. One of them intuition could ignore for as long as it liked. The other, it cannot. What broke was never the arithmetic. The multiplication was honest the whole way through. What broke was the bridge between the number and the world, the mapping that should have warned us before we ever took a step that a million paces is a distance of nations. Both the unit and the count were in our hands the whole time, and we never let the two meet until the map forced the introduction. The reason this walk belongs in a series about systems, rather than in a book of curiosities, is that the failure has nothing to do with feet or roads. It is a failure of unit mapping, and unit mapping is present wherever a small quantity is multiplied by a large count. Consider storage. A single byte is, like a single step, almost nothing. But systems do not deal in single bytes. They deal in bytes multiplied by millions of rows or billions of requests, and an engineer who reasons about the byte while forgetting the count will plan capacity for an afternoon's walk and arrive weeks later, somewhere past Leningrad. The confusion between a bit and a byte, a mere factor of 8, is the same species of error wearing different clothes. A unit quietly mismatched, then multiplied until the mismatch becomes a continent. The same fault line runs through every place two unit systems meet. Metric against imperial. Seconds against minutes, where 1 hour and 20 is not the same as 80 unless you remember which base you're working in, the way 1 ruble and 20 kopecks is not 80 of anything. A train speed estimated from the regulation length of a single rail, where assuming the wrong length for that one repeated unit invalidates the entire figure. However carefully the rest of the counting is done. And in each case, the local quantity is trustworthy and the global result is wrong, because the mapping between them was never made explicit. The error hides in the one place no one thought to check. Even a simple counting frame betrays the same rule. On an abacus, each bead means only what its column promises it means, and the same bead moved 1 row over silently changes the total by a power of 10. Structurally, the walker's mistake and a spacecraft lost to a metric against imperial mismatch are one and the same. A unit is a promise about how a number relates to the world. Multiply by a large enough count, and any unstated promise eventually comes due. So we return to the map with the walker standing somewhere past Leningrad on a road that a single round number quietly built. The lesson is not that large numbers are surprising. It is more specific than that. The lesson is that a small unit is not a small thing once a count is attached to it, and that the count, not the unit, decides where you end up. Intuition is calibrated for the unit, because the unit is what we can see and hold in a single glance. The count stays abstract, and we let it stay abstract, and so it acts on us without our consent, one quiet step at a time. The discipline then is simple to state and difficult to practice. When a quantity is small and a count is large, the total should never be estimated by feel. Carry the unit through the multiplication explicitly, all the way out to the world. Put the number on a map. 750 kilometers was always 750 kilometers. The only question was whether it would be found before the walk began, or somewhere past Leningrad after.